I need your help. I can't tell you what it is. You can never ask me about it later, and we're gonna hurt some people.
Whose car are we gonna take?
Now, we stopped the clip there because it gets quite a bit more violent, but I think you get the point. Normally, I would say I was outraged by such a clip being shown at a caucus of the United States House of Representatives. But honestly, I just find it to be a sad metaphor for what we've seen from the Republicans throughout the course of this debate. An unwillingness to compromise, a barely veiled interest in hurting the president politically, and a plan that would hurt millions of vulnerable Americans while requiring nothing of the most fortunate. When we set out to get our country's deficit problem in order and under control, we knew that we were in for a difficult debate. But I don't think anyone anticipated that our disagreements would lead to the type of vitriol and negative tone that this clip was clearly meant to incite. The clip that you just watched was played yesterday by House Majority Whip Kevin McCarthy during a meeting of House Republicans. It comes from the movie The Town, and you can't miss its point. When a criminal asks his friend for help, saying, "We're going to hurt some people," his friend responds simply, "Whose car are we going to take?" Not only did the Republican leadership apparently think this clip appropriate for their meeting, those in attendance seemed to embrace its message. Look, I am the last to begrudge either caucus using tools to get their members fired up and motivated, and I'm sure Republicans will say that we're making a mountain out of a molehill. They could have used Hoosiers, Rudy, Band of Brothers, but this was the choice that they made. But what does it say about the Republican caucus that such a clip was seen as an appropriate morale boost? And what does it mean for all of us who are depending on those Republican members of Congress to reach a deficit reduction agreement with Democrats and the President of the United States? Who are they planning to hurt? Unfortunately, that short clip from The Town tells you everything you need to know about their approach to the negotiations over the debt ceiling and their plans for deficit reduction, which has been uncompromising and which would hurt the American people. Let's first look at their negotiating strategy. Congressional Republicans have flat out refused to negotiate in good faith with President Obama and Democratic leaders in Congress. Republicans have refused to compromise, even as the president has offered enormous concessions. Republicans walked out of negotiations time and again, making it impossible at this point for us to pass an agreement that takes bold action to reduce our deficit in a way that doesn't sacrifice America's economic growth. And now Republicans are frittering away the last remaining days that we have before the United States would be forced into an historic default with catastrophic global consequences on proposals that are both unserious and irresponsible, that can't pass the Senate, and that would in any case not be signed by the president. All of this would seem to be destructive behavior, but now we know why they're doing it. Now we know why Speaker Boehner didn't mention the word compromise in his address to the nation the other night, and why Republicans have refused to compromise, why it's their way or the highway, why they insist on yielding, on not yielding unless it's to their view. Because to them, this is a political fight, one in which they are more interested in scoring points and hurting Democrats and the president than they are in protecting the country from an economic catastrophe, and one in which they are all too willing to inflict pain on middle-class and working-class Americans and seniors if it would require compromise to do otherwise. Indeed, Speaker Boehner's last proposal, if enacted, could lead to, and I quote, "the greatest increase in poverty and hardship produced by any law in modern U.S. history," according to the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. And the cut, cap, and balance legislation passed by House Republicans last week would threaten future economic growth and innovation and would put the heaviest burden on the backs of America's seniors and the most vulnerable. With such legislation, Republicans certainly would hurt some people. In fact, they would hurt quite a lot of people. But the craziest part is that they expect us to get in the car and go for that ride with them. Well, we've got news for Republicans. We want no part of it. Now is not the time to be firing up the troops with take-no-prisoners rhetoric and examples like the one shown in that clip from The Town. Now is not the time to be thinking about putting the political hurt to the other party or the president. Right now, we need to get down to the hard business of governing and coming together to prevent default and reduce the deficit. Democrats have been at the table, ready to do that for months, yet we don't have partners on the other side ready to come and join us. We are willing to do what it takes to untie the Gordian knot and solve this issue, It's time for Republicans to join us. And now it's my pleasure to introduce my dear friend and insistent Democratic leader, the gentleman from South Carolina, Jim Clyburn.
Thank you very much. I thank the chair lady for inviting me to stand with her here today. As you just heard, I'm from South Carolina. I grew up at a time in the late 50s and 60s when there was a lot of contentiousness throughout the South. I grew up about 23 miles from the little town of Summerton, where Briggs v. Elliott, the forerunner of Brown versus Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas, all started. I joined the NAACP when I was 12 years old, became president of its youth chapter. My dad used to tell me all the time when we were involved in these issues that the first sign of a good education is good manners. I have tried to practice that throughout my entire career. And no matter how strong the differences may be, I have always maintained that the differences or the distance between me and an opponent on any issue are 5 steps. I don't mind taking 3 of them. And we've tried to practice that. I sat in the room for 10 meetings as a part of the Biden committee or the Biden group. In all of those discussions, I didn't find it necessary to ever raise my voice to make a point. I didn't think it was necessary to walk away when things did not go my way. We sat there every day trying to make our case. And that's what we're trying to do on behalf of the American people. The American people, as I have said on the floor of the House, look upon the hall of the House as America's classroom. They should expect us, as members of Congress, to conduct ourselves in such a way when the school children all across the country can look in on our activities, look at the way we interact with each other, and see that as an example of how we should conduct ourselves as citizens of this great nation. I would hope that civility will once again be a part of the discourse here, and I'm hopeful that whatever may be the result of these negotiations, of this legislation, of all that we do here, that we can all look upon each other as brothers and sisters, as fellow members of this great deliberative body, and as examples to the school children all across this country. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're happy to take questions.
Mr. Clyburn, have you gotten any feedback from the White House about your proposal to veto any short-term debt limit extension and this executive order?
No, I haven't.
Yes.
There are plenty of examples of movies with perhaps violent connotations. The Gladiator or Braveheart come to mind, being used at, for instance, sporting events. You know, nobody seems to blink an eye at that, so why should we take the use of the town more seriously? I'm just asking the supporters. And as part of that, do you remember any movie clips being used at Democratic caucus meetings? And if so, what were they?
Well, I'll answer the question. Braveheart was used by Gephardt some years ago as a metaphor for us maintaining our own faith in the process. It had nothing to do with any opposing view of anybody. It had to do with us. We had just gone into the minority, and it had been for the first time in almost 40 years. And so I guess it was done the way I use the USC Gamecocks, University of South Carolina, Gamecocks baseball team that I've used in recent months to talk about teamwork. When you look at a team like the University of South Carolina, and I hate to be saying this with a Floridian standing next to me, If you look at the Florida team, and as I've said to young people, person to person, man to man, they were supposed to win. But everybody will tell you, because of the great teamwork, and that's the only thing we use, and I've talked about that in a political context, but not about going out to hurt anybody.
Lots of other analogies you could have used,
Sure.
Mr. Webb.
Well, we were playing Florida.
I know. There's 2 points here. The more superficial point is that a staff person in the Republican conference had to look for a clip, the right clip, to fire up their troops and to promote unity in their caucus. And the clip they used was this one in which it underscores their desire to hurt people. Either they meant that in their unity they should hurt the president and hurt Democrats, or they meant that they should be unified in hurting people in America, which is what their plan does, hurting seniors, hurting the middle class, hurting children, or they meant it both ways. Either way, there were many other ways that they could have promoted unity without choosing this clip. But the more important point is that at this point in our discussions on how we are going to avoid catastrophic default, is that really the right tone that we should be setting to promote compromise, to make sure that we can do what the American people want us to do, which is to come together and sit down around the table and hammer out a deal that, like the president has repeatedly said, would be painful to everyone that would share that sacrifice? We don't think so. And the more important point is not so much a movie clip, but that now is the time for compromise, not for pain, only piled on one side of the ledger.
You want an apology for this clip?
The clip speaks for itself. That we are just pointing out that we're at the table and they're not.
Do you have any thoughts on Alan West's reported comments where he said, "I'm ready to drive the car"?
No, I don't. I think he's done a good job speaking for himself.
As
Yes.
a follow-up, do you find that his behavior gentlemanly in this case? And unrelated to this, my question was, David Wu is resigning, but staying on for the votes coming up on the debt limit. Do you think he should go before that, or are you okay with him staying on?
I think he's made the right decision to resign. And I think he's obviously got some deep personal problems that he needs to address, and that he has responded to the urging of the people of Oregon in his district, and that was the right decision to make. Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Okay.